Because you know that police don't act like that in real life. And also it's gay. Please don't sit on that. Sybil, you are so gross. I was a fool. A fool, I tell you. Hi there. I'm Sawyer. My pronouns are they, them. Today I'm going to be making an Afghan square. I'm working on my way through a blanket, but I'm just making one portion of a blanket. The square is called the Traveling Crochet Afghan, and it's by Mama DIY, and I will link to that in the description. I'm going to be using Caron 1 pound and claret. I actually have it in a bunch of different colors that I'm going to be using, but today I'm using claret. If you watched my previous video, you would know that Caron 1 pound is my favorite kind of yarn. It doesn't split, it comes with a ton of it for not a lot of money, and it comes in a lot of beautiful colors. So, and I'll link to that as well. And I'm going to be giving book recommendations if you would like to read things, which I do. Most of the book recommendations are going to be fantasy or gay or fantasy and gay. So you'll see I'm wearing my Discworld hoodie. There will be a lot of Discworld in this video if I have anything to say about it, and I do. So I have two favorite fantasy series, both of which are fairly prolific, though one of them is a lot more prolific. So one of them is the Temeraire series by Naomi Novik, and I love a lot of her stuff. Temeraire series is the one that she wrote for adults. It has, I think, 9 books, but and then the rest of her stuff is YA. And not to say it's not good. It is good. I'll talk about that later. But the Temeraire series is basically the Napoleonic War if there were dragons. And it reads like historical fiction, but with dragons, though. So just to give you the summation of the first chapter of the first book, so that you can decide if you want to read it, which you should. The first book is called His Majesty's Dragon, and basically it starts with this naval captain, Captain William Lawrence. This is, in the middle of the Napoleonic Wars, and his ship captures a French ship. And in the hold of the French ship is a heavyweight dragon egg, not yet hatched. And they, that's a big prize. They're all going to get a lot of prize money from capturing this dragon egg. But then the ship's surgeon discovers that it's going to hatch in 2 weeks, and they're 3 weeks from shore. So they want to harness the dragon because otherwise it'll be a feral dragon. So they're going to harness it to join the British Aerial Corps. So they all, but if they join the Aerial Corps, then they're giving up their spot in the Navy. And the Aerial Corps has kind of like a bad rep. All the officers put their names in a bag, and the name that's drawn is this young lieutenant who's scared of heights. And this poor kid, so he's supposed to harness the dragon. So when the day comes, the dragon comes out of the egg and walks around the ship and completely ignores the kid standing there with the harness. And he walks around, the dragon walks around and sniffs everything, and then he comes up to the captain and he says, "Why are you frowning?" And the captain says, "I'm sorry, I did not mean to. My name is William Lawrence. What's yours?" And the dragon says, "I do not have a name." And Lawrence says, "May I give you a name?" And the whole crew is like, oh my God, he's giving up his place as a fighting captain in the British Navy to, like, he's just giving up his whole career. And then Lawrence names the dragon after a ship called the Temeraire. So that's, so then from there it follows what Lawrence and Temeraire go through to, for Temeraire to learn how to be a fighting dragon and fight against the French in the war. And what's great about these books is that each book shows you how another world culture relates to dragons. So like the second book, they go to China because Temeraire is a Chinese dragon, and China has this whole different attitude toward dragons, and it's like culture shock to the British Aerial Corps. So it's really cool. I love the hell out of it. Sybil, can you not make a ton of noise, please? Just chill. Thank you. And the other favorite fantasy series is Discworld, and I'm gonna have to not go on about Discworld for a million years now, which is a challenge. So Discworld is by Terry Pratchett, who passed away a few years ago. But I believe there are 42 books in the Discworld series. But don't worry, you don't have to read all of them. In fact, you can jump in anywhere you want, and you don't need to have read all the previous books to understand them, thank goodness. And there are different series within the series about different characters. And honestly, I would recommend, if you do decide to read it, to not start with the first couple of books, because he kind of hadn't gotten the hang yet of what Discworld was all about and like what the tone was going to be. So like, by all means, go back and read them later if you're into the wizards and if you're into the character of Rincewind. But I would start later. So my favorite, and this is the Discworld, and the whole deal is that it's this flat world that is on the backs of 4 enormous elephants, which ride on the back of this gigantic space turtle called Great Atuan. So it's fantasy. There's a lot of magic and cool stuff like that. It's like a fantasy parody thing, but it's kind of its own thing. And like it takes place kind of in their version of like the 1900s, like the aughts, like 190 blank through like the 1920s, 1930s, but like kind of like mixed technology in there, like jumping around and different technology from what we have on Earth. Yeah, so my favorite series within Discworld is the City Watch series, and I think there are like 8 or 9 books in it, but you can jump in anywhere you want, and like you won't lack context that explains it to you. But they're focused on this character named Samuel Vimes, and he kind of starts out as this drunk as, in the Night Watch, which is like the police in the main city of Discworld, Ankh-Morpork, which is basically like London, but like grosser. And yeah, so each book has a different problem for Vimes to solve. And you might think like, oh, it's police mysteries, like it's propaganda, and I would argue against that because because that police don't act like that in real life. Like, like they're clearly fantasy cops. And yeah, but you have all these great characters. It's like the introduction of this like trans dwarfs. So like you have the dwarf character of Cheery Littlebottom, who comes out like all in the books, like all dwarfs are male, but Cheery Littlebottom comes out as being a female dwarf, and it's like it's received very poorly by the rest of the dwarfs. They're all like ugh, like she's wearing a skirt and they're like, I can see his knees. And yeah, so like it's like, and then it turns into like this whole culture shift where female dwarfs feel comfortable being out as females. So like a lot of people interpret this as them being trans, which I love. Sybil, can you stop making noise? Thank you. Yeah, so, and like the trans dwarfs pop up in various books. But then Discworld also has a lot of standalone books. One of the most popular is like probably the queerest Discworld book, called Monstrous Regiment, which is about this young lady in a country called Borogravia that's just always at war, and she goes undercover and dresses as a man to join the military so that she can track down her brother who's gone missing. But as she's going along, she realizes that a lot of the other men in her regiment are women dressed as boys. In fact, it's almost all of them. So, and it's got a lot of really good character stuff in it, but it's also really funny. So yeah, so other series, they have the Witches series, starting with Weird Sisters, and then you have the Wizards, and you have the Moist von Lipwig series, which is about this con man who finds himself like shunted into these positions of civic power, and he has to like reform reform these organizations. So like going postal, he takes over the post office and has to revitalize it. I'm trying to think of the other series. There are a lot of them. Tiffany Aching is the YA series in Discworld, and it's about this young girl who studies to become a witch, but she has a brilliant character. So that's Discworld. I won't go on for any longer about Discworld. Other fantasy series that I really enjoy. So one of them I just found out is going to have a second book, is going to have a sequel, and I'm very excited about it. It's called The House on the Cerulean Sea, and it's by TJ Klune. And it's about this bureaucrat for it's basically DCF but for magical children. And he is sent out to this orphanage that's out on an island, and he's just supposed to evaluate it, but he winds up really liking the kids there and the way that the orphanage works, and he starts getting really attached. And also it's gay. Very excited for book 2. It's coming out in September. Okay, other books that I like. I am hashtag obsessed with the Murderbot series by Martha Wells. And it too is extremely queer, which we love, we stan. But basically it's a sci-fi series. It's about this person who is a human bot construct called a sec unit, security unit. And sec units are basically slaves. They're not seen as people. They have this thing called a governor module in their brain that if they don't follow orders precisely, then it will kill them. And our main character, it's from its point of view. Yes, it uses its pronouns. I just love it so much. It just thinks gender is irrelevant. But our main character, which calls itself Murderbot in private, it's a secret. Hi, Sybil. Sadly, Sybil has this wound on her forehead, so she looks a little out of sorts. But I got some liquid band-aids for her, so hopefully she's gonna start feeling better soon. Doesn't seem to bother her. Please don't sit on that. Please don't sit on that. No, I need that. I need that. You can sit there, just don't sit on the papers. So you have Murderbot, and in the first book, it's a series of novellas with 2 novel-length books that are, I think, the most recent ones. One of them is my favorite in this series, called Network Effect. But they're really funny. Murderbot is extremely charming. The first novella sets it up with Murderbot. So Murderbot hacked its governor module, and instead of like going on a rampage and killing everyone who'd been enslaving it, it just kept doing its job, but in its spare time just watches a ton of TV and reads a ton of books and kind of learns how humans work and how to be itself without a governor module. And in the first book, it becomes attached to some of its humans, and it comes out that it's hacked its governor module, and the humans surprise it by being understanding and by treating it as a person. So there's a lot of action, which is really cool. It's all very well written, but then there's a lot of cool character stuff where Murderbot is figuring out what it wants to do and like what life is like without being controlled. But yeah, Murderbot, read the crap out of it. If you have Kindle Unlimited, that series is included, I think, except for the most recent one. So yeah, it's really good stuff. Check it out. Really funny, really charming. I also really enjoy queer romance books. So, and uh, so one that I really do recommend is by Casey McQuiston. It's called One Last Stop, and it has some supernatural elements to it, which obviously I like. So, yeah, it's about this young woman who moves to New York City, and when she rides the subway, she keeps running into this incredibly charming uh woman, and they start making an acquaintance, and then it slowly is revealed, spoilers, that this woman is out of her own time, and she doesn't really know how long she's been on the subway. So every time our main character is on the train, the other character is there, and has no memory of what her life was before the subway, and then slowly starts regaining memories. And it turns out she's from, like, I think the 70s. So she's so our main character is helping her figure out what happened and how she got trapped on the subway, and also romance, and it's very cute. I think it's called A Lady to a Duke or A Lady for a Duke. And it's about this trans woman, after the Napoleonic War. So, like, very Jane Austen. And she was a soldier in the war, and then realized that she was trans, so she faked her death so that she could come back and be herself as a woman. But what happens is she finds out her best friend from the earlier part of her life is having a really hard time because he misses her and doesn't know that she's still alive. He just, thinks his best friend died, and he's all messed up about it, and, like, is drinking a ton of laudanum, and, like, just not healthy. So he, so the main character finds out that he needs help, and she goes to, like, help him out with, I think, one of her friends, or, like, her sister-in-law or something. And as she's helping him and he doesn't recognize her, they fall in love. But the whole time, like, the secret's gonna come out, and he's gonna find out that she's his supposedly dead friend, and it's gonna be a big blowout and everything. It's time to talk about Iron Widow. So, Iron Widow is this fantastic book by Sharon J. Zhou, which I am certainly mispronouncing, but a fantastic non-binary author, pretty new. And yeah, so Iron Widow is basically ancient China, but also Pacific Rim. So you have these big mechs facing off against giant monsters, and the lead character is, I think her name is Wu Zetian, and she's like, who is based on an ancient Chinese, like the only ancient Chinese woman emperor. And it is very, very cool. We love a fantasy. We love a disabled main character. And we love a triad, because this book is queer too. So yeah, it has a throuple in it. So Iron Widow, I really, really enjoyed, and there's going to be a sequel eventually, and I am hype. I don't know when it's coming out, but we shall see. Oh, one of my favorite books of all time is John Dies at the End, by David Wong. I forget his real name. The fourth book in the series, he uses his real name instead of the pen name David Wong. But John Dies at the End is one of the funniest books I've ever read. It is just absolutely bonkers. It's like horror comedy, and I don't usually like horror, but it's just so funny. Like, it's got so many raunchy jokes, and just like the character of John is just so off the wall. But yeah, and it's got some really spooky stuff in there too. Some really spoopy stuff. So yeah, John Dies at the End. And I think it was originally like a web novel, so it was serialized, each chapter, and it had like a dedicated following to it. And that one has sequels. Like I said, it's I think 4 books. I haven't read the 4th one yet, but if it's anything like the first 3, then I will certainly enjoy it. The second book is called This Book is Full of Spiders. Seriously, dude, don't touch it. Absolutely fantastic. I don't want to get into too much detail, because it's it's got some really wild stuff. Like, the main characters, they take this drug that they call the soy sauce, and it allows them to see supernatural stuff, and do weird things. So like, there's one part where the main character David is on the soy sauce, and he is talking to John on a cell phone, and the cell phone's about to die, and John says, "Buy a hot dog and talk to me on the hot dog." So David buys a hot dog and then holds the hot dog up to his ear and is talking to John, and he's like, "Oh, I get it. Like, I could have just talked to you anyway." And he takes the hot dog away from his ear, and John's voice is like far away because he actually was communicating with him through the hot dog. So, and David gets relish all over his face. It's fantastic. So funny. Highly recommend. John Dies at the End. And I will link to that one too. All right. She is finished. Isn't it so pretty? So this is just a piece of a blanket. And I'm sure when I actually finish this, which will be months from now, I will show you the whole thing. I'll probably do a video where I'm joining all of them together, and you'll be able to see the finished blanket. So thank you for watching. I hope that you enjoyed. I hope that you will want to read some of the books that I recommended, but there's no requirements. If you're not into fantasy or sci-fi or queer romance, I don't know what to tell you. Sorry. Another time I can recommend other books, but those are my jam. Yeah, but thank you for watching. If you had a good time, I would really appreciate it if you engaged. So leave me a like or a comment, or please subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate that. This is sending out love to all 10 of my subscribers right now. That is so many more subscribers than I had before. So, so thank you very much. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week.